is to carry out a simple approximate deoxidation calculation and demonstrate that how one can really calculate the total amount of deoxidizer which are needed. Let us consider which has an annual production of about 7 million metric tons per annum. Okay, and let's say that the size of a heat is about 130 tons. So that implies that the size of the little or the vessel we are talking about has a capacity of about 130 tons. Let us give some typical characteristics or assign some typical characteristics. The initial oxygen OI is about 600 ppm, okay, and which if you convert to wet percentage will come out to be 0.06%. And then let us assume that we want a killed steel, means much of oxygen in it, and let the final oxygen present in the steel be of the order of 20 ppm. That means we removing of 580 ppm of oxygen. That's what we are talking about. Okay, equivalent to about 0.05. That in every 100 kg of molten metal there is about 0.58 kg of oxygen, and oxygen that we are required to be removed. So you can imagine, with reference to 130 ton little, the amount is going to be really huge, and if you translate that amount in metric tons per annum of steel production, the total amount of oxygen removed is going to be really enormous, which essentially implies that we will require a lot of aluminum to deoxidize the bath. Let us also say that the tip is about 1600 degrees centigrade or 1873 Kelvin, and we are considering deoxidation by aluminum only. We are talking about a case of simple deoxidation. So, situation, if you calculate if you talk about reaction between aluminum and oxygen now, so this is 2 atoms of dissolved aluminum reacting with 3 atoms of dissolved oxygen, which is producing Al2O3. And as I mentioned to you, that as reaction is concerned, total requirement will be dictated by stoichiometric reaction requirement as well as thermodynamic requirement. Okay, we have 2 components, and we will add them up, and this together will give us the net requirement. Stoichiometric requirement essentially can be found out by looking at this particular equation. This tells us that, well, 27 into 2, that is 54 kg of oxygen, aluminum, be reacting with 3 into 16, 48 kg of oxygen. So therefore, we have 48 kg of oxygen is equivalent to about 54 kg of aluminum. This figure of 580 ppm or 0.058 wet percentage, this corresponds to about, let me just look at the figures, this corresponds to about 75.4 kg of oxygen in 130 ton heat. Okay, so we are saying that we have to reduce. So this amount is actually, so this much of oxygen really has to be eliminated. So many kg of oxygen has to be eliminated, and if on the basis of this equation we can therefore say that the corresponding amount of aluminum which is going to be needed is going to be 75.4 divided by 48 multiplied by 54, and this is going to be something like 84 point, approximately about 84 kg. So that means the stoichiometry, on the basis of stoichiometry, we can say that 84 kg of aluminum is going to be, in order to purely to say that we want to reduce the level of oxygen by 580 ppm. So this much of oxygen is going to really correspond to this much of oxygen in terms of kg, kilograms, in a 130 ton heat. So for every heat the stoichiometry requirement is going to be 84 kg, but this is not going to be enough. So, this 84 kg is actually comes here 84 kg. Okay. Now, we have to calculate the thermodynamic requirement, and the thermodynamic requirement can be found out by considering the equilibrium of this particular reaction. And if you write the equilibrium constant for example, we are going to say activity of Al2O3 in the oxide phase divided by, if we assume Henryan activity of oxygen cube and activity of aluminum square. We can assume here, for the sake of simplicity, that the activity is equal to, activity of alumina is equal to Al2O3 is actually equal to 1. So, this can be assigned to be 1, that is, we are considering a case of simple deoxidation. And now we can make one more drastic assumption that, well, the Henryan activity can be approximated, in terms of a wet percentage scale. So, this is going to be really equal to wet percentage of oxygen, okay, cube multiplied by wet percentage of oxygen aluminum squared. Okay. So, that is what it is going to be. Now, this K equilibrium, which is directly related to minus delta G naught, okay, divided by RT exponential, can be known from thermodynamic data, and the value that I have obtained is K equilibrium is equal to approximately 3.32 into 10 raised to the power minus 13, and inverse of it. So, I am writing the K equilibrium for the forward reaction. If I have to write for the backward reaction, the value of K equilibrium is going to be simply reverse. Okay, the inverse sign will vanish, and then we will get the value of K equilibrium for the backward reaction. So, if I substitute the value of K equilibrium, what is the final level of oxygen? That is already given to us, which is equal to 0.02002, and then from this particular equation we should be able to find out that what is wet percentage aluminum. And now I go to other side, and from this, by substituting the value, I can say that wet percentage of aluminum square is going to be equal to 1 inverse 1 by wet percentage of oxygen cube into K equilibrium. So, now I substitute the value of K equilibrium is equal to this into this expression. I substitute this is equal to 0.002. That is what is the final level of oxygen we are talking about. K equilibrium we are talking about 3.32 into 10 raised to the power minus 14. This is actually 14. I stand corrected here, okay, and this is inverse, and then I should be able to calculate what percentage of aluminum, and this I think comes out to be equal to 4 into 10 to the power minus 6, which gives me wet percentage aluminum in the melt in equilibrium with 0.002 wet percentage oxygen is equal to 0.002, and this turns out, this tells me that, well, the thermodynamically about 2.6 kg of aluminum is needed as far as equilibrium calculation for 130 ton its size. And this is 230 J of aluminum in equilibrium. With 0.002 wet percentage oxygen. So, I come back here. I have already obtained 84 kg, approximately 84 kg to be the thermodynamic stoichiometric requirement on the basis of this calculation. So, this figure wet percentage of aluminum is this much. So, I can translate it very easily that in 100 kg I have 0.002 kg of aluminum. So, therefore, in a 130 ton hit size or 13 into 10 to the power 4 kg, how much of oxygen is going to be there, and that oxygen turns out to be is equal to some value, that aluminum is going to come out to be 2.6 kg of aluminum. Okay. So, this value incidentally turns out to be same as the value that we have. It is just mere coincidence, okay. Nothing beyond that. So, 0.002% wet percentage of aluminum is there in the bath in equilibrium with the same amount of oxygen, and this once translated to 130 ton ladle size, we find out that the thermodynamic requirement is actually 2.6 kg of aluminum. Now we can sum this two up, okay, and then tell us that, well, the net requirement is going to be approximately 86.6 kg. So for every 130 ton hit size, we are going to require now 86.6 kg of aluminum, which is to be added. And now if I translate it to 7 million tons of steel, you can imagine that value, and it is going to come out to be something like, I think, 500,000, approx 5,000 tons of aluminum. So this is the total requirement for the 7 million tons. For 130 tons of heat, we require 86 kg. So for 7 million tons of plant production, how much of aluminum is going to be needed, which is equal to 5,000, approximately 5,000 tons of aluminum. And taking that aluminum is about $2.5 per ton. Okay, this comes out to be approximately 6 lakh rupees in Indian currency. So this much of oxygen, this much of aluminum, okay, 5,000 tons of aluminum will be needed by the 7 million ton steel plant, and this 5,000 tons of aluminum at the current rate of production consists about 6 lakh rupees, or in Indian currency. Now it is important to note that this assumes that we are adding, if we add 5,000 tons of aluminum, okay, or in a given heat, if we add 86.6 kg of aluminum, that much aluminum is going to be utilized for as far as stoichiometric and thermodynamic requirement. So we are not considering any loss of aluminum, but in reality what happens is that we have to add more amount of aluminum, much more than 86.6 kg, because some of the aluminum added is going to be reacting with the atmosphere. What did I say? I said earlier that, well, we have a ladle here, okay, and that in this particular ladle we have stream coming in, and we are adding aluminum in this way, and all the aluminum will be floating here. So these are going to be my aluminum. So the aluminum, deoxidizer aluminum, which is added through the chute into the melt, is going to come to the free surface because of its lesser density, and as a result of which this aluminum, a part of it, is going to be reacting with the atmosphere as it reacts with the, as it melts and dissolves into the molten steel bath in order to react with dissolved oxygen. So therefore it is understood that we have to add more amount of aluminum than is dictated. This is the requirement of the process. So this requirement, now I can say that, well, requirements and what is added divided by what is added determines the efficiency of utilization. Efficiency of utilization. Okay, and so requirement is how much? Requirement is 86.6 kg, but we are going to add more than 86.6 kg, and as a result of which the efficiency of utilization is going to be less than equal to 1. Now for buoyant additions like aluminum, etc., the recovery rate or the efficiency of utilization is significantly smaller than 1. It is about 60 to 70% in general processes, as a result of which you can enhance these values, by about 30% or so. So the 6 lakhs of money that I am showing here could translate to something about 10 lakhs, 12 lakhs of rupees per annum. So the calculation has indicated that large tonnage of aluminum is required in steel plants when we are going to produce low oxygen steel or kiln steel, and we have also noted that huge expenses are involved as a result of the large tonnage of aluminum, and therefore there is considerable interest in the industry to minimize the wastage of aluminum. I have also mentioned that the efficiency of utilization, which we also term in the industry as recovery, the recovery of aluminum because of its wastage, its reaction with the ambient and other, sometimes FeO in the process, gives us a small value, much lower than 1. So quite a bit of aluminum is going to be wasted, which will not take part into the deoxidation reaction at all. So industrialists have been concerned for improving the recovery rate of aluminum, and in much older times, many other processes like bullet shooting methods, etc., were devised. As I have indicated earlier, that typically bulk of the additions, aluminum additions, will be made through the chute. Okay, it is going to be dropped through a chute, pointing to the region where the stream from the furnace is entering into the ladle or the impact zone, such that the aluminum can be entrained subsurface. So the scientists knew that we have to somehow keep the aluminum submerged, and then only we can improve the recovery of aluminum. We have to stop the contact of aluminum with the slag or with the environment, and aluminum has to come in contact directly with the metal. So therefore, it has to remain subsurface. And earlier, many years back, people used to introduce a method which is typically called, which of course is obsolete now. There are better methods I am going to tell you, bullet shooting methods, and this basically were devised, in which you have a big gun through which huge aluminum bullets point, which is like cylinder conical shapes. They are going to be injected into the or pumped into the molten metal or molten steel. And people used to think that if you can shoot the bullet of aluminum with a very high speed, it has a potential to penetrate deep inside the bath, as a result of which the recovery of aluminum can be increased, because it can really go inside the subsurface. Today, apart from bulk alloy additions of aluminum, we have wear feeding of aluminum, which is very popular. Okay, and this is basically done in order to improve the recovery or efficiency of utilization of aluminum. For example, the aluminum wears, if you have a melt-in ladle, okay, so you have a porous plug here, through which argon is going to be injected, okay, and once you have a coil here through which the aluminum wear comes, and it is, so this is basically a roll which rotates, and this is the aluminum wear. So you have a huge coil from which, through pulley, the aluminum wear is drawn, something like this. Okay, so this is the coil of aluminum wear. These are basically essentially coated aluminum wear. So it is going to be fed into the bath at a very high speed. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that is a solid object which is being entering into the molten metal. So therefore, a solid crust is going to be formed around the wear, okay, as it enters. So this is a solidified crust, and then the crust melts back, and at this particular moment, maybe you can think that jet of aluminum is going to be issued, and this jet of aluminum, because of its buoyancy, is going to rise up, and these droplets of aluminum are then going to dissolve into the bath, whereby they can react with dissolved oxygen producing alumina. So the efficiency of utilization is more reproducible, and the efficiency of utilization or the recovery is also significantly more than the bulk addition that is typically practiced, and that I have been talking about all along this lecture. There is another process also which is known as the CAS-OB process. And this process is again another version of the argon starred ladle. So the material has been poured into the ladle from the furnace, and now what happens is, if you look at the process, it goes something like this. So we have a snorkel here, and we have the porous plug somewhere here. So from the porous plug you have bubbles which are going out, and this is the melt here. So we have basically the slag layer which is contained outside this snorkel. So this is an inert chamber basically, and we have the melt surface here, and this region, this is slag, and here there is no slag, as you would note here. So therefore the bubbles rise here within the central part. There is large velocity there because the gas is rising through this snorkel. There is an inert atmosphere here. There is no oxygen because the argon gas is going to be there, and through this chute alloys like aluminum, etc., are going to be introduced into the melt. Now, once we introduce aluminum through this, we must understand looking at the figure, that aluminum will have no chance to come in contact with the slag, okay, and also aluminum, even though it might float on the free surface, we may see that the aluminum blocks are here really, okay, but because I don't have oxygen in the atmosphere, this environment is really filled up with inert gas or argon gas. So therefore, what we will see that the buoyant additions which are going to be introduced into the CAS-OB process will have a greater potential, okay, to react with the molten metal, dissolve into the molten metal, than reacting with oxygen as would happen in a typical conventional furnace tapping operation. So CAS-OB process, it is now well known in the industry that it gives rise to much more better recovery rate of aluminum, even when people are adding, sometimes recarburization of steel. So to get the maximum utilization of graphite, this is a technique which normally people uses. This is a very efficient method for introduction of buoyant alloying additions. So I will stop about deoxidation at this particular moment, and now I am going to go into the second topic, which is the ladle metallurgy. But before I start ladle metallurgy, I would like to bring to your notice the significance of ladle metallurgy, for example. Now, I have been talking about, also that primary steel making, we produce crude steel which contains a lot of impurities, and the duration of primary steel making, of course, will vary depending on the capacity of the converter, 30 minutes, 28 minutes, 50 minutes, something like that. On the other hand, secondary steel making or ladle metallurgy involves a variety of processes. There is not just one process. Steel is being treated. Once the ladle is filled by molten metal from the furnace, then the secondary steel making or ladle metallurgy operation starts. Okay, and the objective of ladle metallurgy or various ladle metallurgy operations can be several. One, we say the commonly is inert gas stirring. This is one aspect of. I will explain to you what is the necessity of this. Then we have injection metallurgy. We may inject something. We may have heating. And we may have degassing, basically. And also we have various specialized processes, special processes. Like AOD and VOD, which is termed as argon oxygen decarburization and vacuum oxygen decarburization. As you all know, that stainless steel, for example, contains very little amount of carbon. We don't want carbon, because if you have carbon, then chromium carbide segregates and the quality of stainless steel deteriorates significantly. So we require low carbon, and when you produce stainless steel, there are specialized techniques to decarburize the bath, and these are the two techniques. So a variety of processes are really fall within the domain of ladle metallurgy, and the duration of all this put together can be much longer than the duration of primary steel making operation. We must understand that if we try to introduce or treat steel through all these processes, okay, the cost of steel is going to be extremely large. Now, therefore, for every grade of steel produced, all these treatments are not going to be justified. Okay, we may just do inert gas stirring and heating for a common grade of steel, but for a specialized grade of rail steel which does not tolerate too much of hydrogen, for example, in that case, on top of these two, we may be interested to carry out degassing processes, because degassing is a process to drive out dissolved gases from molten metal. So the more and more secondary steel making processes are going to be incorporated in the steel making circuitry, we will see that the duration of production is going to be longer, steel production is going to be longer, as a result of which the productivity of the plant is going to go down, and it is compensated by obviously raising the price of steel. So therefore, steel produced by simply inert gas stirring and ladle heating is going to be less priced than steel treated by inert gas stirring with heating and degassing combined itself. And as it is to be noted that for every grade of steel, all these treatments are not justified. We have to understand or we have to know the specification of the customer, what the customer wants, and based on that we are going to select that whatever are the processes which are necessary to be encompassed in the domain of ladle metallurgy operation. Inert gas stirring, let me briefly introduce these terms, essentially tells about introduction of argon gas into molten steel. Why we use argon? Because we must understand that we are now continuously refining steel. We are producing, we have removed decarbonization, produced crude steel, we have removed oxygen, we are going to take out subsequent operations. So, at this particular stage, we really do not want to contaminate. We do not need oxygen. For example, there is nothing to burn there, no silicon oxidation or phosphorus oxidation is necessary. If you introduce nitrogen, okay, to start the contents of the ladle, in that case what happens, steel is going to be rich in nitrogen, that is also not desirable. So, basically we are going to introduce argon into the ladle. So, during the ladle metallurgy treatment, all along these processes, the material in the vessel needs to be continuously stirred. We require stirring here. Without stirring, the rate of the metallurgical processes are going to be, or the chemical processes are going to be very, very small, because we know that steel making reactions are basically mass transport control reactions, and mass transport control reactions have a tremendous influence on the fluid dynamics of the reactor. So, therefore, in the absence of any stirring, we will not see much rate of the chemical reactions or noticeable rate of the chemical reactions. That is why we need stirring, and gas stirring, as I have already mentioned, is the cheapest mode of stirring. And we require inert gas stirring because the inert gas is not going to contaminate molten metal. At every stage from now onwards, we are going to ensure the steel does not get contaminated either from the environment or with the refractory or with introduction of foreign materials and so on. So, inert gas stirring is an essential part of ladle metallurgy. The objective is to continuously stir the contents of the bath such that thermal homogenization, material homogenization, chemical reactions, inclusion flotation, these can all operate with its maximum efficiency. Next comes injection metallurgy. Injection metallurgy talks about injecting some powder through an auxiliary lance into the molten steel. What is the objective of injection metallurgy? For example, we may use some reagents to control the morphology of inclusion. Okay? We may use some powdered material also into the molten metal to say increase the rate of desulfurization. So, there are many objectives, and injection metallurgy is very popular, which essentially tells of injection of solids in the powder form into molten metal. Powder form we use because then the surface area is more, which essentially implies that the rate of reaction is going to be more. And injection metallurgy is very popular in the context of inclusion morphology change, in the context of desulfurization and so on. Next comes heating, which is also called as LF operations. In this case, the ladle is going to be, as I will show you later, the ladle is going to be converted into a ladle furnace, whereby just like the way we heat molten metal in an electric or scrap in an electric arc furnace, in the same manner electrodes are going to be submerged into the top slag layer, and it is basically an arc heating process that is essential for the heating purpose. Now, why do we need heating? We must understand that we have tapped the molten metal at 1600 degrees centigrade, for example. Now, having tapped the material at 1600 degrees centigrade, lot of heat is going to be lost through the wall, through this wall, and possibly significant amount of heat will be lost to the top surface, okay, because the top surface is a slag cover. These are all refractory covered. So, as a result of which we will see tremendous amount of heat is going to be lost. Now, if heat is going to be lost, so and that the duration of secondary steel making or ladle metallurgy is substantially more. So, we can envisage that the total drop in temperature because of such heat loss during the process are going to be really considerably high. Now, typically, during the holding period of a ladle, it is known that about 0.5 degrees, okay, per minute. This is the rate, 5 degrees centigrade per minute. This is the rate at which the temperature drops during the holding period. Also, we must understand that in the secondary steel making or ladle metallurgy operations, we may be used we may be using different solid reactants, we may be forming slags, we may be injecting some solid species, or we may be adding some alloying additions to adjust the composition of the steel. These alloying additions, the dissolution of lime for making fresh slag, etc., are going to consume heat. These are all endothermic processes, and where from the heat is going to come, the heat is going to be taken away from the metal, and as a result of which the metal temperature will drop significantly. But remember that the downstream process is the continuous casting process, where we require a fixed temperature. So, we have tapped the molten metal at 1600 degree centigrade. If you do not do heating and carry out all these operations, by the time the material goes to continuous casting bay, it is going to be considerably chilled, maybe prematurely solidify as well. So, somewhere in between the circuitry of Ladle metallurgy, we do require that a heating operation be done, and this heating operation basically compensates for heat loss as well as heat required for many endothermic processes which are carried out under Ladle metallurgy seal making conditions. And as I said, there is electrode heating, the same principle as arc heating in an electric arc furnace is being applied, and I am going to show you later a nice drawing of a ladle furnace. How do you convert this ladle into a ladle furnace? That will be very clear when I show you the electrode, etc. And there you will come to know that why this porous plug is really located off the center and not immediately below on the central line. Okay, it is shifted either towards the left or it's offset basically. Why it is so, that will be clear when we talk about the ladle furnace. Following heating, we have degassing process, and degassing basically is removal of gases. We have, as I mentioned to you, now the molten metal might contain lot of nitrogen. Where from nitrogen has come? Nitrogen has basically come during the tapping and entering of the tapping stream into the ladle. So, the furnace, in the furnace we are using basic oxygen furnace, we are using oxygen, okay, and now that when you are tilting the furnace and we are filling up the ladle, that during that process what happens is the molten steel draws, falling molten steel stream draws lot of surrounding air which contains lot of nitrogen, as a result of which the material contained in ladle will contain lot of nitrogen. Also, depending on the quality of the raw material used, lime etc. contains lot of moisture, and also there are a lot of leakages in the many plants also, as you can see. So, there is sporadic contact with water vapor and so, which gives rise to significant amount of hydrogen, sometimes even 3 ppm, 4 ppm. So, nitrogen and hydrogen which are there in the steel can be driven out by degassing, and as I will show later on, that degassing is most effective under vacuum or under reduced pressure condition. So, to produce quality steel that does not contain much of dissolved gases, oxygen we have removed by deoxidation, and whatever little nitrogen and hydrogen are there in the melt, that can be removed by the vacuum treatment of steel. And specialized processes, as I said, the names are clear: argon oxygen decarburization, because when we decarburize the bath, we inject argon and oxygen together, and this argon and oxygen helps decarburization of the bath. The oxygen injected reacts with carbon, produces some heat, and also carbon monoxide, and this is again vacuum oxygen decarburization, because you have the reaction dissolved oxygen and dissolved carbon, and we know that smaller is the partial pressure of carbon, larger is the tendency of the reaction to go from left to right. So, we will be able to produce a low carbon steel, extremely low carbon steel, if you are operating at a low pressure, and this is the essence of vacuum oxygen decarburization. So, now I am going to discuss about inert gas stirring in detail, and since the steel is now sitting in the ladle, we will talk first about the construction of a ladle, which is very important for us to understand. So, if you look at the ladle, it really looks like a cylindrical shaped vessel. So, this is the longitudinal sectional value, and I draw that this is. So, let us say that this is the view of the base. Basically, this ladle is contained in a steel shell. This outer shell is steel, and then we have lot of refractory materials. For example, we can have refractory tiles here, we can have papers here, lot of ramming materials here which constitute the permanent lining, and then we have finally the layer of this is going to be the refractory bricks, and there are different kinds of bricks with which this is really this. We have steel plate, we have refractory tiles, we have refractory papers, and then we have so these are the bricks. Now the bricks are not of uniform type here. That means there is a gradation of bricks depending on the requirements. We can see that if we take the longitudinal cross section, maybe there is, this is where we have the porous plug which is located, and then we have to drain molten metal out, and we have a well also at the bottom. Now this is steel shell. Typically we will see that the ladle is going to be filled up with some steel with this particular height, and then we may have a slag layer which is there. So this is going to be called as the freeboard of the ladle. So this distance is freeboard. Okay. Otherwise, if we do not have freeboard, then what happens? If we translate the ladle, because the ladle is to be moved from one place to another, what happens? The molten steel is going to flow out of the ladle. So significant, some amount of freeboard, 60 centimeters, 70 centimeters, it varies from plant to plant, is necessary. So molten steel is there. On top of molten steel, we have slag layer, and this slag, as I repeat again, is not the oxidizing slag of the furnace. This slag has been prepared afresh. It is by the addition of lime as well as spar materials, silica in the ladle during the filling operation, and also now it contains lot of alumina also, because we have added aluminum to deoxidize the bath. So alumina, CaO, SiO2, this is basically the composition of the slag. Now this lining which is there on the freeboard is not critical for us, because this is not subjected to much of hydrodynamic erosion. Mostly the chemical and hydrodynamic erosions are going to be there over these surfaces. Okay, these are the surfaces which are going to be attacked severely by molten metal and slag, and this zone basically we can divide roughly. This is the freeboard zone, and then we can say that there is the slag zone, and then we have this metal zone. The slag attacks refractory vigorously depending on the composition of the slag, and if you particularly have little bit of iron oxide, that is detrimental for the slag, because iron oxide impregnates into the refractory brick. So the corrosive, to minimize the corrosive attack of brick refractory on the brick, the slag zone material is basically, it is a MAC coke, MG coke, MAC coke brick. On the other hand, this part is going to be basically primarily alumina brick. If you look at the cross section, then what happens is, we see at the base we have, this is the well here, and this is the porous plug here. So this is porous plug, and this is the well. Okay, and below this we may have a slide gate. I'm going to, maybe you know, or I'm going to talk about it later. The slide gate controls the flow out of the ladle. Okay, this ladle is going to be taken to continuous casting. It is going to feed a tun dish, and therefore we have to take out molten metal. So through this porous plug, as we introduce gas, it is through this well we are going to be taking out molten metal. Typically during the process, this remains closed by using some refractory or ramming material and so on. And somewhere here we must understand, this is the region which you should plan, that when the molten steel stream from the furnace enters the ladle, it is here that the stream really impinges. If the steel impinges here or here, there is going to be significant damage to the ladle. We don't want porous plug or the well region to come directly under the falling stream. So the stream is going to be falling on this. So there is going to be a different kind of a refractory material, in this particular region, because the impact of the stream is going to be really severe. So extremely large hydrodynamic erosion can be expected in this particular region where the stream is falling. So this is the BOF stream striking region. And this region needs to be reinforced properly with the refractory material. Now, the plug, as I have shown here, this plug is typically located as, if you look at this, if this represents the R value, this is located at roughly about 0. So 50% of the bath radius position, or we say that the porous plug is located typically at mid bath radius position. The number of porous plugs, for example, maybe 1 or 2 depending on the size of the ladle. In many ladles of bigger capacity like 200 tons, 250 tons and so on, we can have twin porous plugs, and in this case, the porous plugs could be located diametrically opposite, or they could be displaced, located in the adjacent quadrant, and the whole arrangement has to be restructured when you have twin porous plug, then what I have indicated in this particular figure. Now, argon is going to be injected through the porous plug, and as I mentioned to you that the flow rate of argon will determine the extent of agitation. Now, we have a diverse range of argon flow rate, and the typical argon flow rate can go from 0.1 normal meter cube per hour per ton of steel to about 0. or 10 times more. So 1 normal meter cube, let's say N normal meter cube per hour per ton. So this is the range of ladle metallurgy steel making argon flow rates, and this flow rates, as you would note, is significantly smaller than the flow rates in an oxygen steel making process. Now let us look at when you introduce gases, what happens. So when you introduce gas, argon gas through the bottom, okay, this argon gas rises because the gas has buoyancy, just like the way you would see that you have a long, if you go to a thermal power plant, for example, you will see a big long chimney, and through the chimney the smoke comes out, and that is called a smoke plume, which rises vertically upwards because it is lighter, it is at higher temperature. In this case, the gas is lighter than that of steel, so as a result of which the gas rises through the molten steel because of its buoyancy, and this region we say that it is a argon liquid steel plume region. So argon plus steel plume. Let me give you a clarified picture now, having given you the design and the refractory features. Let us not draw about it. So I have the ladle here, I have the porous plug here, I inject argon, and what I see is a region here through which bubbles. This is the slag layer. So this is slag, and this is my refractory lined ladle, and this is molten metal, molten steel, and this is what I am talking about. So we can expect that as the gas is issued from the porous plug, we will have the gases rises, and as the gases rises, what happens is it draws along with it molten state metal, and as a result of which it creates an intense kind of a flow within the system. Also, the gas has to leave to the surrounding or go back to the surrounding, and this is typically called the slag eye or the plume eye. Through this, the argon bubbles really escape to the surrounding. Now you see, there is a very interesting aspect of argon stirring operation, is that we have oxygen here, and this metal contains no oxygen, no dissolved oxygen. We have taken away all the oxygen by the addition of deoxidizer elements. Now as the slag eye is being created, what happens here? We have molten metal which comes in direct contact with atmospheric oxygen. So, as a result of which oxygen gets dissolved, because oxygen has extreme solubility in molten steel, great affinity of oxygen with iron, and as a result of which at this high temperature lot of oxygen passes into the molten steel, and this oxygen, once it gets into molten steel, what happens is it starts reacting with aluminum which is dissolved in steel, and aluminum fading starts, and as a result of which the slag becomes progressively richer in iron oxide. And this is a very important aspect which we call as a reoxidation of steel. So, if we are looking for quality steel, this reoxidation must be prevented to the extent possible, particularly towards the later stage of ladle metallurgy steel making operation. The porous plugs are basically refractory materials, because a part of it is in contact with molten metal, as I have tried to indicate in this figure. So, they can be either pressed or they can be cast. Both the ways they can be produced. They can have random pores, and they can have directional or directed pores. Some of them have slots also, by which gases are delivered into the molten metal. Now, the precise nature in argon stirring operation, argon injection operation, the precise nature of the pores, etc., really does not influence much about the flow field which is generated in the system, because the size of the bubbles which are generated in the system is dictated by thermophysical properties, because the flow rate is small. Typically, a big gas envelope forms here, okay, and this gas shatters into a number of bubbles, and these bubbles rise, and the size of these bubbles are dictated by the thermophysical properties of the melt, rather than by the details of the pores, and whether they are directional or random. So, this has virtually no role to play, and the flow recirculation or the intensity of flow which is produced here depends on the flow rate rather than the characteristics of gas injection. So, that means if you are injecting gas per se, for the sake of the statement I am making, instead of a porous plug, if I would introduce the same amount of gas through a say 2 air, it is going to produce the same amount of, more or less the same amount of recirculation. So, therefore, the details of the nozzle design for argon injection into ladle is not much critical. It is only important for us to know that we require this refractory material which can sustain for a long time. We cannot afford to replace this porous plug every heat. So, it has to sustain 8 hits, 10 hits, 12 hits depending on the requirement, and we have various techniques, they have different performances as far as argon injection is considered. So, we can have 2 plugs, we can have 1 plug. 1 plug would be used for typically 50 ton, 100 ton, 130 ton size ladle. 2 plugs would be used when we are talking about 300 tons or 500 ton ladle size and so on. And we are using a variety of range of gas flow rates. This depends on the objective of argon stirring operation, and the objective of argon stirring operation, I would say, would be, one is homogenization, and homogenization means we are talking about mixing. Okay, so if you add a spoon of sugar into a cup of tea, in that case you got to stir it, and this is called the material homogenization. You are, otherwise what is going to happen if you don't stir it? You will sip the tea and see the first sip doesn't contain much sugar, whereas the last tea that you are going to drink will contain lot of sugar, and that is because of the inhomogeneities of sugar distribution in the cup of tea. So, argon rinsing basically is carried out to homogenize the bath in terms of its temperature, in terms of its composition. So, we would have, as a result of homogenization or argon rinsing, same amount of oxygen or same amount of nitrogen or same amount of silicon everywhere. We are going to have same temperature also, more or less, in the system, not much difference. So, thermally and materially it can be homogenized by argon injection. So, second objective of argon injection, so this is basically homogenization, which is called in industry or shop floor as a rinsing operation. Then we have, in heating operation, we can have arcing or a flow rate during composition adjustment. So, and we can have desulfurization also, slag metal reaction. Slag metal reaction. When you are talking of rinsing, basically this is the final stage of argon rinsing. That means all treatments are over. We are going to now give some kind of a little gentle stirring into it, and we require a very small flow rate so that the eyes become small and there is not much scope of reoxidation of the melt. Arcing, which is the heating operation basically we are talking about, at that particular moment we are going to add a lot of alloying additions which has to dissolve, so the flow rate is going to be a little bit higher. And for desulfurization, we require extensive amount of slag metal mixing in the system, which is carried out during the beginning of the argon rinsing operation. Immediately following deoxidation, in that case the flow rate could be very, very high. So, the flow rate that I have quoted for 1 normal meter cube per hour per ton basically corresponds to the desulfurization process in Ladle. On the other hand, 0.1 normal meter cube per hour per ton corresponds to the rinsing operation, and somewhere around 0.4 to 0.5 normal meter cube per hour per ton would correspond to the alloy dissolution or making the chemistry right during the Ladle arcing operation, such that material and heat are distributed evenly in the system. So, all Ladle techniques have one thing in common: they in one way or other uses argon which is injected from the bottom of the ladle. The objective of argon injection is to stir the contents of the ladle, which can aid in thermal homogenization, material homogenization, chemistry adjustment, inclusion flotation, and many other allied aspects of steel making. Now, before I proceed further, I would like to talk about a little bit about the initial part of ladle pretreatment. That means, when we bring the ladle below the basic oxygen furnace to tap the contents of the furnace into the ladle requires to be preheated, and the preheating is basically carried out in gas fired furnace. Preheating of ladle. So, you can imagine, if you look at the ladle is, I have drawn the ladle so far as a perfect cylinder, but please note that the ladles are rarely perfectly cylinder, they are about marginally tapered. My drawing may not be that good, but this tapering we are talking about in ladle is about 5 to 7 degrees. So, the refractory line ladle is put in this particular position, and then it is sealed with a cover, and in this cover we have holes, and there are burners So, these are burners. And as a result of which there is convection and radiation of heat. In this chamber. Okay. So, before we take the ladle to for a tapping operation, the ladle is going to be preheated, and this is basically, this is the cover, really refractory cover, and there are holes, and we burn gases. This is gas fired burners, and as a result of this burning of the gases here, we generate enormous amount of heat, and the heat is going to be convected and radiatively distributed all over, and as a result of which the ladle is going to be preheated. Now, typical preheating time can go from several hours, depending on the size of the ladle. By the by, what could be the size of the ladle? I have myself seen plants like 30-ton size ladle, where they have small little electric arc furnace. I have also seen plants which are about 500-ton BOF. So the ladle sizes can vary enormously. 30-ton size, you can imagine, about 1 meter diameter, to about a 500-ton size ladle, which could be about 4 meter diameter. So it's an enormous difference in size, and accordingly, the amount of refractory which is used will be significantly different. Amount of the duration of reheating or preheating is going to be also significantly different. Several hours will be needed to preheat, and basically we go up to 1100 to 1200 degree centigrade, and once it is done, the ladle is ready, and then the tapping operation can initiate. Because otherwise, if you take a cold ladle and pour the hot metal from the blast from the BOF, what is going to happen? There is going to be enormous impact on the loss of temperature or loss of heat, and as a result of which we will form solidified skull. Bulk, much of material will be solidified over the refractory lining. So never ever steel is going to be poured in a molten, in a unheated ladle. Okay, so this is the porous plug, and this gives us a complete picture. Now, there is another term which I want to introduce, which is called the recycling of ladle, which I have briefly mentioned. Recycling of ladle, I want to give you some figure. The recycle of ladle implies that we have, from the furnace, we have a preheated ladle, okay. It goes to ladle metallurgy, or we say secondary steel making. From there, so the tapping operation can be, if you are casting, tapping maybe about 8 tons, 7 tons per minute or something like that. In that case, you can fill up the ladle in less than 10 minutes if it's a 50-ton size. So we are talking about 5 to 10 to 15 minutes time duration here for the tapping operation. Furnace could be about, again, 30-40 minutes, and then ladle metallurgy duration here could be about 60-70 minutes. And once all the secondary steel making operations are over, assuming that we require degassing, LF operations, ladle furnace operations, or heating operations, injection metallurgy, everything, then we go to the continuous casting. The same ladle travels to continuous casting bay, and then the empty ladle is brought here. Empty, but it is a red hot ladle, red hot, because it was containing. So this is actually called the cycling of the ladle. How many times the ladle can move in this cycle? It depends on maybe 70 hits. It can go up to 125 hits. That's the figures that I have from my own experience with particularly the Indian steel industry. Okay. So after 125 hits or 70 hits, the life is, we say that the life of the ladle is now over, because there has been tremendous amount of erosion of lining, tremendous amount of skull formation, and therefore the ladle necessitates some kind of a relining exercise. In that case, what happens? The working lining is going to be replaced, and new bricks are going to be put depending on the requirements of specific regions, as I have mentioned earlier. So to sum up now, I will in ladle metallurgy, we are going to introduce lot of argon through the porous plug. The argon will start the contents. The objective of ladle metallurgy is to enhance the composition and cleanliness of steel. Cleanliness is a very important parameter which I have not so far talked about. In this course, we will come across this term repeatedly towards the later part. And devoid of inclusions, removal of inclusions, modification of inclusions, these are extremely important. So the objective, it is really the value addition goes in secondary steel making or in ladle metallurgy operations. It is the heart of today's steel plant activities, because this is where the quality of steel is harnessed to the maximum possible extent. We have virtually, when you talk about the high grade automotive steel, high grade pipeline steels, okay, these are the steels which have no impurities, very tight compositions with no casting defects and so on, and their foundation is laid in the lead metallurgy area itself.